Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Mark Young, and this is the Whitaker-Myers Wealth Managers YouTube page. Thanks so much for joining us. Our firm, we specialize in retirement planning, financial planning, and doing it the Dave Ramsey way. And we love his process, his way of teaching, his order of operations. And so today we're going to get the privilege of speaking to one of our outstanding colleagues, a colleague of Tim and I's, Ben Allen, who is a fellow financial advisor and fellow SmartVestor Pro, loves and lives the Dave Ramsey way of running your finances from a biblical perspective. Ben has been so instrumental in helping his clients achieve their financial goals through our firm's personalized planning process and his deep commitment to the principles that define not only Whitaker-Myers, but also the Ramsey Solutions and their team and their approach to wealth management. So in this conversation, we're going to delve into Ben's journey into the financial services industry, his approach to client success, and his insights on just navigating biblical finance and economic challenges in today's world. So Ben, welcome, and thank you for taking some time to share your expertise and guidance with Tim and I on today's video.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
Yep. Yeah, we're absolutely excited to have you, and you've got a great history with our firm in many different facets that I'm sure we'll dive into today. But as it relates to what we do here in terms of financial planning, financial advising, talk to us, Ben, about what inspired you to take your career in this path, down this path, I should say, financial advising, financial planning, and how has your journey, as all of ours have shaped the approach to the way that you help and work with your clients today?
Yeah, it's kind of funny how, our stories are often a thing that only makes sense looking backward. I think I was watching a documentary on the band The Eagles, and the guitar player Joe Walsh, says, man, life only makes sense looking backwards, like in the rearview mirror. At first, it seems like a random occurrence of all these events. So I feel like that's true for me for sure. I studied accounting in college and kind of always had an interest in business, but I also was deeply impacted by a ministry called Young Life when I was in high school, volunteered with Young Life while I was in college. And so when I graduated with this accounting degree, I sat down with the managing partner of the Pittsburgh office of Deloitte, and I kind of said, hey, can I be assigned to local public accounting audits or, do something that will allow me to volunteer in my local community and give back? And he kind of laughed and said, it doesn't really work that way. We kind of own you for the first few years of public accounting. If you really want to do that, serve other people, then you should maybe just go that route instead. And so I started working for Young Life largely because this guy had kind of counseled me that direction. But fast forward through years of working for Young Life, and eventually in 2013 joined Whitaker-Myers on the insurance side, and really was able to kind of feel the benefit of sitting down with somebody and helping advise them in, part of their financial picture. Obviously, property and casualty insurance is just a small part of their overall financial picture. But really where I found myself today and what got me into financial advising is it's this perfect blend between the world of relationships and counseling people that I really had a heart for on the ministry side, and then the business interests that I've always had. And I think that even different than my time in insurance, financial advising is a really good on the ground with people when they're thinking through future and meaning and purpose and legacy and taking care of their family. My wife and I adopted one of our 4 children, and there was a big financial cost to that decision. So helping people think through what are the desires that God has given them, what does it look like for them to live in a way that honors those desires, and then help them accomplish that financially is just a great thing. So I love what I get to do, and it seems like a perfect blending of all my experiences that led me, to this point. Makes sense looking backward.
Yeah. Now, Ben, before we move on, can you dive us into, because you introduced me to Young Life, where I grew up, it just wasn't a thing. I didn't know about it. And man, it makes so much sense in terms of those formative years, really creating a group of people that you can do life with, disciple, ship, all that kind of stuff. But tell us what Young Life is.
Yeah, the real quick kind of description on Young Life started in 1941. There was a Dallas Seminary graduate student named Jim Rayburn, and his senior capstone project in seminary was to go to a local church in Gainesville, Texas, Presbyterian church, and serve for 6 months. And the pastor of that church met him and said, "Jim, we have a great youth program. We don't really need you here." And he kind of waited for that to sink in. And then the two of them walked to the front of the church and they looked out the window together, and Jim pointed at the local high school across the street and he said, "Jim, we don't need you here because we have a great youth program, but we do need you over there because there are kids in that school that wouldn't darken the doorway of our church or any other church in town. If you can figure out a way to meet those kids and to share the gospel with them, then you can stay and that can be your internship." So Young Life was really born in 1941 out of that desire of Jim and the pastor of his church to go figure out a way that disinterested students can be engaged by an adult who cares about them, and out of that place of relationship that the Christian faith can be shared. So there's all different strategies and ways to share your faith, but the relational focus of Young Life was something that really appealed to me. And so, I've coached high school sports for I think 13 seasons, and just tried to dive into the community wherever I've lived, and building relationships with people seems like a great way to share about things that matter in your own life, and get them to share about things that matter in their life.
Yeah, and that relational aspect is so important. I was talking to a client this morning, and he was telling me how he was an atheist. He didn't believe in God, and he said, I had this semblance that there was some sort of order and some sort of like something controlling, everything, but it wasn't God. And so I'm like, well, how did you get to where you're at today? Because you are very clearly Christian today. And he said it was relational. It was one person's relationship with him, which I guess just really goes to the impact of during the last, interview we did with one of our folks, it's him and I. We talked about the impact one person and one person's advice had on a career. And when you think about gospel impact, which is so much more valuable than career, uh, it's almost the same thing. It's, we all, as we constantly say, need that Paul Timothy relationship in our life, somebody
Yeah.
we're pouring into and somebody that's pouring into us. And Young Life seems like a great way to do that.
Yeah, it certainly was that way for me in high school. And I remember when I kind of hit that middle school age where you're making a lot of decisions and figuring out your identity and how faith fits into that whole thing. Is this my family's thing, or is this something that I actually believe, myself? And, our church, there were a lot of great people there growing up, but their youth pastor sort of moved away right during that transition period for me. And I was kind of left with, so how do I connect? How do I fit in? And it was a Young Life leader who happened to coach football at our high school, who was just showing up at the school. I remember every day going to my car, at dismissal, and he would be there kind of in that bottleneck where students meet the parking lot. And he was on the football field, and he would come to, lacrosse games and just try to get to know us and meet us where we were. And from that place of being a part of our world, not just asking us to go be a part of his program, we were way more interested in the things he had to say. And so, man, do I still respect that guy today. And he's one of my best friends here, 20 some years later.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, same here. I went to Young Life as a high school student. So shout out to Rich and Emily Dargenio, but they made an indelible mark on my life at a time, like you said, you're growing up, finding your own way. Ben, I have a question for you. Aside from maintaining an excellent hairstyle, which is the mark of any good financial advisor,
He's one of the balds.
what are you doing right now to grow yourself professionally? What certifications are you working on? Specializations you're exploring more? Kind of describe your path on that and how you are you continuing to grow as a financial advisor?
Yeah, I'll tell you, right now I'm partway through the what's called the RICP designation by the American College of Financial Services, and that stands for Retirement Income Certified Professional. So that's what I'm working on right now, as a way to just continue to grow the depth and breadth of my knowledge, able to help clients think through how they're going to be able to plan for their retirement. As you know, Tim, as a CFP, that's a huge, wide gamut. You could go in any different direction. And with a background in insurance and a background in accounting and personal finance, I was excited about kind of digging into that retirement side of things, and then hope to follow that up with jumping right into the CFP designation in 2026.
Yeah, because financial advising and financial planning covers a wide gamut, but that income part in retirement, it's uncertain sometimes. Do I have enough? How am I going to make this work? What's the transition like? Has anything stood out to you going through that training that's really
Yeah, I think
important?
Well, one thing that I think has stood out so far is how the non-financial aspects, like you were talking about, the uncertainty, how much of what we do is for sure dollars and cents and numbers driven, but how much of it is the soft sciences, if you will, and behavioral coaching and getting people to think through, what do you want your life to look like, and what is an income dignity floor for your life in retirement look like, and how they define that. Have they thought about how to define that? Or what's the relationship between what you want to live on and what you want to leave the people that you care about in some sort of a legacy gift? And yeah, just really interesting thinking about how all of us have our own desires for, how we want to live, but also how we want to bless other people, whether it's the way we give and are generous to our churches or other organizations or people in our family, set people up for, schooling or anything like that. And balancing that with, but we want people to learn on their own and take care of themselves and teach people to fish so that they can continue to, eat the rest of their lives kind of principle. And there aren't easy answers to those things. And so I think that that's so far has stood out, that it's not just tax brackets and spreadsheets, but it's a lot of those soft skills and pastoral almost conversations.
Yeah. Now, Ben, you had talked a little bit about that you had adopted, so we know you have at least one child. But maybe walk us through the holistic picture of your family. Well, tell us about your family. Tell us about some of the things that that drive your interest outside of work, so people can just get to know you a little bit more from that perspective, and maybe to the extent that they do come in and influence your work a little bit, how that parlays.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we have 4 boys, and I'll tell you, my wife and I kind of decided in our mid-20s we wanted to start a family, and like a lot of people, struggled for a few years with infertility and just not getting to actualize that blessing that we had really felt God, calling us to, and eventually did become pregnant with our oldest son, and so man, that was a huge blessing. But when it came to number 2, we just sort of started from the standpoint of and this, John Mark, this was close to when we, first met. We start from the standpoint of maybe we should just be considering adoption. Not only did we think, we want to have a large family, but we also had some great friends from our church who had already gone down the adoption road. A few of them had adopted internationally, and just felt like, man, what a great picture of God's love for people, that he would bring us into his family and, give us the same rights and privileges and status of Jesus himself. It doesn't look at us as like a redheaded stepchild or a distant cousin, but looks at us as kings and queens right alongside Jesus. So we wanted to live that out in adoption, and we engaged a Christian adoption agency called Spirit of Faith. They were based out of Toledo, to kind of lead us through that process of doing a domestic adoption. And lo and behold, 9 months later from the time that we started that journey, we had a blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy added to our family, and that was our second son. But even before he had officially arrived, I think it was a few weeks after we had sort of been paired with his biological mother, through the agency. We had said yes to the agency, and 2 weeks later found out we were pregnant with our third son, which didn't seem like it was going to be easy or possible. And so, a few years later, we had our fourth. Uh, and then it was like, okay, we thought this was hard, but now we need to cut this off now. So we got four boys, and my oldest is in middle school, my youngest is in kindergarten right now, and we got a lot of wrestling, a lot of shirts off, sweating, rowdy house at home.
Yeah. How does your
That's
wife
great.
deal with the only female aspect of her her
Yeah.
existence in your family?
Well, one thing that she does, and I give her a lot of credit for this, she asks every Mother's Day, she says, I do not want gifts. I want all of my boys to dress up nice and throw me a girly tea party. And we get out the china and the tablecloths and the little sandwiches and stuff, and we do it up. We do it up. We give her what she's missing out on. So, and luckily for her, she has a couple of nieces, so she gets to treat them as the de facto daughter she doesn't have.
She didn't have any brothers growing up, correct? She just had a sister?
Yeah, right. Yeah, so she was girl central growing up, and yeah, she's been surrounded by boys. So we got a basketball team now, and yeah, she's like our general manager, keeps us in line.
That's great. That's great. Well, when you come into work, let's transition back there. What's your philosophy around your job, around financial planning? How do you approach customer service, and how do you tailor your strategies to make your advice customized to each of your clients' situations?
Yeah, I just did this with a couple of clients this afternoon. I like to start every meeting, especially an initial phone conversation or an initial meeting, with let's get to know each other first. And I put a disclaimer. I'm not just doing this to fill out time, or it's really because I think any kind of serious conversation around what your goals are should be based off of relational connectedness. And I find that when you start to get to know people and give them a chance to open up, they're going to start to speak to things that if they were just filling out a questionnaire about here's what I want my retirement to, that might not hit that questionnaire, or we might not have asked the right questions to get that. But then if you can initiate a conversation. So when it comes to like my approach, I think I really lean on the relational connectedness. I want to hear people's stories. I want to know what keeps them up at night. I want to know what their future, their perfect financial future would look like. What are the pressure points or the points of pain based on the way they grew up in their relationship with money? Or, if it's a married couple, who's the spender, who's the saver? Just kind of get to know what the vibe is. I find that our conversations down on the line of investment selection and risk appetite and funding different goals end up making a lot more sense when we start from that point of view.
Yeah, I
Yeah, no
think
doubt.
a big part of our job is helping our clients walk that path and ask the questions. A lot of times our concerns are less about a rate of return, but what is this money going to do for me, and how is it going to prepare me to reach my future goals?
Yeah, no doubt. There are, as you both well know, there are times that the non-financial pieces are just as big of a factor as the financial pieces. And, as much as we would all love to make as many dollars as we could possibly make in our life, there are other things that are, more significant sometimes. And people who have children, sometimes, there are issues there. I know we've got, one of our children has some extra challenges, and having capacity, like parental time and attention to help walk him through those challenges and, figure out how to deal with them as he grows up, that's huge. And that's not something that I personally, we would feel good about just outsourcing to, a babysitter or whatever. So yeah, I think that's a big piece of it for sure.
Yeah. Now, Ben, take people behind the curtain here a little bit. as a financial advisor, and you've got this like constantly evolving, updating um, situation of tax law, of retirement income structures, of what's the asset even worth. I mean, that technically changed in the last minutes here, there. And we just saw this last week with the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset getting eliminated, and that just totally changes the way that you have to think about your situation. So talk people through, how do you as a financial advisor ensure that you're kind of staying up to date with everything that always changes? How do you do that, and how does that then translate into kind of how you feel like you can give them the best advice to them?
Yeah, this is a great example of where my experience when I worked in ministry. There's so much Christian ministry, there's so much theology and scripture knowledge and all this just pieces of info you could acquire and commit to memory. But then there's the whole question of, well, how do I apply this to people? And how do I, in situations, in leadership, in life, relationships, and sort of, I can never just fill my schedule with, when I had that job, I could never just fill my schedule with meeting with people, because eventually you start to run out of things to say. But I could also not just fill my schedule with studying and Bible studies and theology books, because I would not be applying that and it would be useless. And so, yeah, behind the curtain, my approach is I try to start off every day by doing communication follow-up. I try to get back to people with a phone call or an email, definitely within 24 hours when they send something to me. And then I try to give myself an hour to just catch up on what's happening in the economy. And we luckily, our firm provides some great educational resources where we get daily briefings on market trends and things like that, so we can understand what's happening. I subscribe to the Barron's weekly printed version, a newspaper, so that I can read a little deeper dive on what's happening and what is about to happen. So that's kind of my rhythm, is to balance relationship and connecting with people, and just general professionalism, and follow up with what we talked about before, continuing education, studying for the RICP, and then what's happening right now in the markets, so that as the day progresses and I have my meetings and I have scheduled phone calls and I'm working on things with people, that I'm doing that with the most up-to-date knowledge of what's happening that I can have.
Yeah, and that that balance of all that. I mean, you can be really smart and not be able to apply it. You could be able to apply things phenomenally, but not know anything. In a lot of areas of your life, including finance. It's so good to be balanced, and yeah, it sounds like that's a pretty good rhythm you get yourself into. Now, what is it? 21 days, I think, and something's a habit. I mean, you start doing that regularly, and that just becomes what you do, and you're used to it, and it's just part of the routine.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if I could just apply that to working out, I think I'd be that's a 2025 goal.
There you go. Now,
Yeah.
Ben, our listeners may not know, but Whitaker-Myers has a very special relationship with Dave Ramsey, and that's been growing over a long period of time. How did Whitaker-Myers' specialization of working with Dave Ramsey fans influence you in joining Whitaker-Myers Wealth Management? And how do you think that benefits your clients?
Well, I think that as a person of Christian faith, I think having a partner like Dave Ramsey who shares that, and then is meeting clients, meeting in quotes, daily, or whatever their rhythm is, how often they listen to Dave or hit his website or read his books, is just such a great compliment and great bridge to establishing mutual trust. Any kind of advisory relationship that any of us have is really based on trust. And at the end of the day, any of us only have so many hours we can spend talking to somebody or meeting with somebody. So to kind of have a partner that, even if it's asynchronous and even if it's a one-way, Dave posts podcasts or writes books, that just seems like a great bonding agent between our value system, mine as a person and ours as a firm, and then what the client is developing on their own. And, sometimes that's a very important thing to the client, and they've been following Dave for years. And then other times they're very new to it, and they're sort of like a college freshman or something with their eyes wide open, like, oh my gosh, like this is all new. And in either case, it's just fun to get to walk with them through, the baby steps. And that's another thing that I think is just really attractive is the Ramsey relationship has helped us take something that is very complicated or can be viewed as very complicated, like finance and the economy, and make it understandable. And that's something that maybe was a parallel to some of my previous experience where you're talking about heady concepts like theology. Maybe that's kind of like finance for some people, but everybody has a working knowledge of what that should mean. They know their own checking account, and being able to uh, meet people where they are and put things in terms they can understand is something that I really appreciate about Dave and enjoy doing, myself.
And the reality is, Dave just doesn't have time to sit down with every one of his listeners, but he does have the principles that he can apply to everybody, that everybody can take, grasp onto, and follow. But it's a special ability and special experience to be able to connect with somebody that's been walking those steps and then flush out some of the nitty gritty. Well, how do I approach this, or what should I think about with that? It's pretty neat to connect with people on that level.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Dave figured out a long time ago, it's less about knowledge, although that's important, but it's so much more about behavioral. And you're seeing that translated, whether it's the CFP board that now has that as a major part of their testing, behavioral finance. Dave said, hey, from day one, you've got to build good habits. And how do you do that? You do it a baby step at a time. You can't change your entire philosophy or life overnight there. And that's why I've heard people like Michael Kitces, who is so influential in our industry, in the financial advisor industry, talk about, hey, the appropriate way to pay off debt now is the debt snowball. Why? Because we know it's less about interest rates. The fact that one's at 19 and one's at 7 is somewhat irrelevant. It's what's going to motivate you to get that out of your life, because any dollar that's attached to someone else is not a dollar that's going toward your family's benefit.
Right.
And that's where I would say, he's got that figured out. A lot of people want to bang on him for a lot of different things, and maybe rightfully so, maybe not. But what they haven't figured out is 10 million people a week cling to that.
Yeah. Yeah. For a reason.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say, even to people who might look down their nose a little bit, like other RIA firms at the Dave Ramsey thing, is look, if you've got a lane that you want to run in, that's great. We like this lane for a lot of reasons. And I think that even if you have somebody who followed the baby steps, that's just going to mean that they have committed themselves to the behavioral finance aspects. It's going to make them great savers one day. If they have to pay off $120,000 worth of debt and they do that and become disciplined about that, boy, that translates into a great savings rate. And they become very good partners, very good clients for us. And I would much rather be helping people walk through that and finding those people who are committed to those principles that are going to make them successful than just trying to, filter through people like they're just numbers, look for the people who already are sitting on a couple of $1 million and then move on to the next one. I think the Dave Ramsey crowd is a really special group of people. And when we get people that call in, it's a great thing to get to help them.
Yeah, no doubt. Whether it was Tim's video last week where he really hammered on building an emergency fund, getting out of debt, or the book, What the Happiest Retirees Know, where they studied thousands of people that had retired. The common denominators to people that lived a more stress-free life was debt elimination or complete reduction, and margin between them and Murphy's Law. And again, that's just what he, preaching to the choir. Well, really what Dave would say is what he's doing is he's taking God's advice, which is, Proverbs, biblical principles, and grandma's advice, which is like where America was, so much a Christian nation, and not that we're totally, atheists today. I don't think that at all, but you could definitely say years and years and years ago, when we are close to our founding, we were much closer as a nation to God's principles. So he's taking grandma's advice, God's and grandma's advice, and he's just turning that into financial advice and investment strategies there. And so when you think, Ben, about biblical finance, you're going to the Kingdom Advisor, stuff, and that's a lot of the stuff that we love as well too. How does biblical finance or biblical principles, kind of guide the way that you serve clients? And again, you're coming from a very theological background for part of your career as well too, on top of the financial background you had, the accounting and insurance background. So how does that all fit into this?
Any principle needs to be based on something, and ideally something that's objective, unchanging, not relative and subjective. Everyone has opinions, right? So if you can base your principles around something that isn't relative and changing, then you've got something special. Some people make those up. Some people base those off of data, trends, their life experience. I think having Christian principles that are based on God's word, and it's, been tested even for its wisdom over thousands of years, is such a great starting point for developing any kind of principle. As it relates to finances, I mean, the Bible's so clear about the way that money can function to either help the world toward human flourishing, blessing people, or how it can hinder those things. It's value neutral. It's a tool to be used for good or evil. So how we steward financial resources is something that we all need to know and we all need to be aware of. If we don't have a plan, then we're planning to fail. And with regard to money, it can run our lives if we let it. I was reading the other day, I don't know if this is the exact number, but the American credit card industry spends something like $4 billion on advertising per year. And I was talking to somebody about that, and they were thinking about consumer debt and car loans and credit that we're told it's fine, buy it now, pay later. It's like those companies are spending that money for a reason, because they want you to pay them all this money in interest. They wouldn't be spending that money on advertising if everybody just did what makes sense biblically, what grandma's common sense is, which is to defer gratification, to bless other people, to think of other people more highly than we think of ourselves, to diversify our resources and not put all of our eggs in one basket, and the list goes on and on. So yeah, I think it's not only is it a good way for me to represent my values as a person to my clients in a relationship that needs to be anchored in trust, but it's also just objectively a great framework to draw any kind of a principle from when you appeal to scripture. It's been around forever. Its wisdom has been tested.
So Ben, can you share an example of something significant you've been able to help one of your clients with? This occupation, it's a privilege to be able to walk with our clients and guide them. What's something that you've been able to work with your clients and helping them through?
I was at a wedding recently with some folks that I used to do ministry with, and they said, "Do you ever miss working with us? Do you ever miss the ministry?" I said, "No, I get to do it every day. It's a huge part of the job that I have now." And they said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Look, I've had people who lose their job and then they call because they want to talk through their financial plan and how they can steward their emergency fund well and what their future cash flow looks like. I've had widows call and in tears over the phone describe to me how their husband always dealt with finances and this is very scary to them and they really need somebody that they can trust. I've had, a working mother decide that after a couple of years she wants to quit her full-time job and go to part-time to stay home with her 3-year-old for the next few years. And is that financially feasible for them to do? Could I help them look at that? And just to see in any of these cases the relief in someone's eyes when you walk through the plan with them and kind of weigh it out. Yes, you could do this. It might mean that you're going to give up this. It removes so much of the uncertainty, like we talked about earlier. And I find that that's just as much ministry as anything else. And for me, that's been the most enjoyable part of my job, is to take this potentially very scary, weighty thing, which is personal finances, and walk alongside people through some of these big decisions.
Yeah, no doubt. The and when you think about, those examples and, just you're one person, and, you have so many people that when you have any level of success in any industry, whether it's pastoral work, or I'm an accountant, or I'm a financial advisor, or, whatever, um, there's only one of you to go around to those people. So what's your process on making sure you're like open, you're transparent, you have communication that's regular, for your clients throughout, these different phases of their financial life and journey that they're going down?
Well, what I talked about earlier with our relationship with Dave being so helpful to have a partner, I feel that way about our firm. I think Whitaker-Myers does such a great job with content creation, and whether it's the articles that our advisors are writing and they're always available on our website, to the weekly newsletters that go out. What happened in the markets video? I was just talking on New Year's Eve with a friend of mine who watched the most recent video that Summit did, and he's like, "Yeah, I really liked this point that he made, and tell me more about that." Um, you know, to these podcasts that were or YouTube videos that we're putting together, I just think that us putting things in front of clients and living out our value to have the heart of a teacher, that man, that's such a great partnership that we can have, because I am only one person and I would be on the phone all day talking to clients and still not getting to all of them if it were just up to me. But we have a great team, and I'm really excited about our ability to do that and continue to get better and better at it.
Yeah, and that is definitely an iron sharpens iron type of mentality with that. Whereas, hopefully you're learning from your fellow, coworkers and laborers. Um, but also, and I don't think I've told you this, but just this weekend, or actually not this weekend, it would have been, we're having days off in the middle of the week, which is throwing my, internal clock off here. But I guess it was in the week. I have a client that's saying, "Hey, I had a great year this year in income. I maxed everything out, because we're debt free. Where else can I save?" And, it was backdoor Roth, but a quick way to explain the backdoor Roth was an article you just wrote a month ago ish,
Yeah.
somewhere in
Yeah.
that time frame, which was an excellent article. So, I sent him that article on here's what you could do. And here's a great explanation of what it is and why it's helpful. So I think you're right that, in today's world where content creation is so, so easy in a lot of ways, but it's time. It's like a lot of things. You just have to put attention towards it. And I think I often talked with our pastor about, man, we really don't like. Are we going to be more called to the carpet in terms of our faith? Because like we have all these resources of like not only the George Whitfields of the day, or the historical pastors, but we've got the John MacArthur's of the world, and that are here today with us, that we can like 30 years ago, you wanted to watch John MacArthur's sermon. I mean, he was one of the few that was taping it and mailing tapes out. But I mean, that just wasn't possible multiple years ago. And from a client's perspective, to be well educated and well informed on a regular basis from their team that they're working with, we think that's an important core value we want to have, that helps our clients understand, compartmentalize, and process a lot better the things that they're going through.
Yeah, for sure. That's funny. I remember when you say that. I remember growing up, we would go visit my grandparents, and they lived just outside of Tampa a little ways. And there was a pastor of a church down there who my folks used to listen to these recorded tape cassettes when we'd be driving before the podcast days. And they still talk about what a great communicator that guy was of God's word. And they're like, I wonder if he has any podcasts. I'm like, I'm sure he does, Mom. I'm sure he's out there. But that stuff sticks with people. And like last week or the week before, John Mark, there was a client who who came to us, but they had been just getting the weekly email for a while. I think they, maybe for 2 years, and they weren't at a place where they were ready to do anything or invest or whatever. But we had that ongoing relationship with them, and we're not pushing anything either. I think that that's something I appreciate. We're really interested in putting out helpful content, and it's not just a, hey, buy this product, or let me tell you the features of this new investment vehicle. We're just trying to help equip people to think about their own finances and make good decisions.
Ben, speaking of being pushy, there's all types of financial advice out there. I mean, you can get the free dinner and somebody's trying to pitch you an annuity, or you get an internet ad and they're trying to sell you something else. But what would you say? What would you think? What do you believe sets you apart from other financial advisors, and why do you think clients should work with you?
That is such a great question. And I tell people this when I talk to them on the phone. I say, let me tell you what makes our firm different than even other SmartVestor pros, because they're not all the same. And that's part of the beauty that Dave connects you with all these different people, and you can choose as a client who you want to work with. But I think the fact that our firm has been around for 150 years in financial services, of course, starting on the insurance side, but now including not just property and casualty insurance, but also financial coaching, a tax advisory service with CPAs, estate planning, and wealth management. We just have this great history and robust service offering that most other investment advisors don't have. And then you throw on top of that the fact that we're an independent advisory firm, and we're not subject to filling some quota for our own proprietary products. We're not doing revenue sharing. We're a fiduciary. We are fee-based advising, that we have CFPs that can do really in-depth financial planning. I know, Tim, you and I were talking to a gentleman this week about some very nuanced things that I just don't think a lot of other advisors or firms are really equipped to do. So when people ask me that question, sometimes I even offer it up. Let me tell you about how we're different, because I think we have so much to offer. And, you know, everybody's different, and that's cool. But I think for most people, I've been blown away that when I go through all of those things, how people feel relieved and confident, because the older that you get and the more your personal, financial, and life complicates itself, I think that having a one-stop shop for a host of resources for things that are important to you is a really big benefit. So it's attractive to people. A couple I was meeting with this afternoon, they've got some life insurance. It's probably not enough. And they said, could you get us life insurance quotes? Do you have somebody on your team that could get us disability insurance quotes? All the different things that are part of their overall financial picture. And to be able to say, yeah, no problem, and show them kind of the 5 different arms of our organization, puts us in a great position to do the best thing we can for the client.
Yeah, no doubt. So let's wrap this up with legacy, and I'm going to take this 2 different ways on you, okay? So when you think about legacy for what you want your clients to have remembered you for, what's that those long lasting, you're 30 years into a relationship with a client, how would you have measured that success in your role as financial advisor? What would the legacy of Ben Allen have been if you executed and were faithful in all the little and big things that you wanted to as a financial advisor?
Yeah, I think that there's probably a spectrum of client advisor relationships. So it could fall anywhere on that spectrum. The cliche, picture from maybe some commercial 15 years ago would have been, your financial advisor's there at the hospital when your child's born and is there at the wedding and all the different, key points. But I think as a metaphor, that cliche actually is maybe my answer. As a metaphor, like I think if we're consistently serving our clients and having regular conversations about things that matter to them, what their goals are, and then crafting strategies together to help them achieve those goals, they're going to view our relationship as one of those important relationships. Now, regardless of whether we're physically showing up at, major life events or not, we would be part of those life events by ensuring their success. And it's almost like a bad referee in a game is the one that you notice because of the bad calls. I think like a bad financial advisor would be one that, doesn't take the relationship seriously, offers poor advice, or inattention maybe is even worse. But if we're doing a good job, our clients aren't going to feel like, oh, we had our big financial advising, sync up conversation. They're going to feel more like there's a regular rhythm of communication through individual conversations and planning, even if the planning is annual, and we're going to have, constant communication through our newsletters and education and follow up. So I think people would view it as one of their most trusted advisory relationships.
Yeah.
That would be my 30-year look back that I would feel good about.
Yeah. Now I'm going to put you on the other side of it here, on the legacy side of it, because you've watched your dad, who has been in an advisory role for 30 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about him, I think about just somebody people look to for his expertise, somebody I look to for his expertise as a role model for me. And did it well, did it, without scandal, without disruption, and never perfect, as none of us are. But how do you look at somebody that you were so close to, and his legacy, and how it impacts you, and it's influenced you, and how you want it to influence you, and just how you tie that together, because you're close to that, and now kind of doing that in a different capacity, but
Mm-hmm.
similar in a lot of ways too.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a book written by I think a pastor maybe, but it's called Long Obedience in the Same Direction. And the point of that book is, living the Christian life is this long obedience in the same direction without the scandals and the ups and downs, and just hitting a lot of singles, single after single after single after single, builds a career over a lifetime of really great on base percentage. I think that's what I've grown up around, what I've for sure seen in my dad and his career, and how clients have viewed him as a long obedience in the same direction. It's becoming increasingly uncommon today that you would start a career, work for the same company for 30 years. But that what that communicates when you do see it, and the way that you can steward those relationships over time. I mean, that's something that I aspire to, and it doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't have to be, you know, necessarily something that's in the headlines. Or it's one of my indelible memories was I was probably 10 years old, and of course my dad was mostly selling and servicing property and casualty insurance clients. And it was a Christmas Eve maybe, and there was a big windstorm, and a giant tree had fallen down on top of this house of an elderly gentleman. I want to say he was in his 80s. And my dad said, "Hey, get in the car. We're gonna go over to so and so's house." And so we go over there, and the power's out, and this tree's down, and it's getting dark. And there's this old 80-year-old man huddled up with a blanket around him and a little lantern, just sitting in his dark living room while the rain trickles in. And I just remember thinking, oh man, my dad actually cares about his clients, and he's not just sending him an 800 number to call to get a claim processed in a few days, but he's like going to check on them. So if I can walk with clients in a similar way, even in a different space with their finances, I think that'll be a career worth having.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a great story. At our kids' school, they have a saying, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's like, it's on one of the walls when you walk in, and it says, the act of becoming a Christian is the decision of a moment, but a lifetime of actions, a lifetime of, kind of becoming. It's you decide in a moment, or you make that decision, and then for a lifetime you try to live as to the way we're called to live, to be a gospel patron, to live out the Great Commission. And so yeah, that's none of us are perfect at that, but that's such a great story of how much your dad cared, and it doesn't surprise me at all. Well, Tim, this has been amazing. I had no doubt that you would have great insight on this podcast. Thank you for spending some time to
Sure.
let people get to know you a little bit better, and just feed off of your knowledge and experience and whatnot there. And we certainly appreciate it. Any last parting words you'd have as we end this call?
I thought we would talk about Bitcoin for a few minutes. No.
Well, we are post the $100,000 mark, and we'll see where we go this year. I've seen as high as 150, and I'm sure there's even higher out there expectations for this next year. And that's a that's a fun topic in and of itself. So maybe one we would say, call your financial advisor if you'd like more information on should that be a part of your portfolio. Tim, anything you'd add to this conversation as we close it?
Well, I think what you'd find in Ben, which is typical of financial advisors here, it's more of a lifelong calling and not just a job where he comes in, punches the clock. So it's been good getting to know Ben, his family a little bit, and his philosophy.
Yeah, very good.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, thanks so much for watching today's video. If the video was helpful to you, would you do us a favor? You can do us a favor by hitting the like and the subscribe button. The like button helps push our content out to more people on YouTube and Rumble through their algorithm, as well as the subscribe button allows this content to be pushed to you as we release it. New content we're creating every single week. So thanks so much. We'll look forward to seeing you next time.